Well, good evening, everyone. Michael Soothing here. I thought what I would talk to you about today is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, which actually happened during the summertime. But Oreo just came out with these marshmallow commemorative. Did they just come out with it? Limited edition. See? Limited edition. These will be rare Oreos in the future. So if I save a few, maybe they'll be worth good money. Anyway, I'm going to chat with you about that moon landing, and I'm also going to check out the photos on these Oreos. And we'll also talk about the moon landing itself, because I printed out some stuff to chat with you about that have to do with that moon landing. I even have a National Geographic here that has some stuff about the moon landing. You want to see a picture of where they were? A snapshot from their vacation on the moon? That doesn't look like the moon. It looks like a futuristic car. I think I'm on the wrong page. That's the moon in pop culture. Let's see if we can find a proper. Here's the landing, the lunar module. Looks pretty beat up on the outside there now, doesn't it? Look, here's a dog that went to outer space. The Soviets sent this dog. What's his name? Strelka, the dog. He was barking in Russian when he was there. He was barking with a Russian accent. Like that. Let me see what I can find here. I thought I saw big pictures of the moon in this special edition. Anyway, never mind all that. Here's the Saturn V rocket. As you know, I'm fascinated with space. And as it turns out, this thing went up in my senior year of high school. So it was interesting to me. So we'll chat about that, but first, let's see what they did with these Oreos. Opening the package here. And these Oreos have sort of a purplish filling. Purple blue, right? It's got a little space shuttle thing on it, but the space shuttle wasn't around during the moon landing, so, you know, if you're a conspiracy freak, then you think that the moon landing was all faked. We'll talk about that a little bit. There's the moon and some stars. My conspiracy theory says this looks too much like a symbol that belongs to an... Wait, what's this one? Here's a little spaceman. Uh-oh, this cookie's coming apart. Looks like we'll have to eat this one, won't we? Of course it says Oreo on the other side. But, and what else is there? Is it the standard Oreo pattern? I don't know. Now, as many of you know, the proper way to eat Oreo cookies is with some milk. You have to dip the cookie into the milk like this. You can see I have one floating in there already that I messed up. Dip it into the milk until it gets soft, okay? Then you can eat it without making crunchy sounds, so I don't disturb. It's still a little bit crunchy, not too much. I'm not going to eat all 4 of those cookies, by the way. No. Just that one. All right. Sorry for those of you who dislike any eating in ASMR videos. But that part's out of the way now. And we can talk about the Apollo 11 program instead. They had some big problems before Apollo 11. Apollo 1 was messed up, and the guys died in that one. Gus Grissom and the rest of those guys. But Apollo 11 was the first time where human beings landed on the moon. For those of you who have read the lunatic conspiracy sites that say the landing was faked, let me just mention that it would have taken about 8,000 people to be in on the conspiracy, and none of whom would ever speak about it. And of course, if you have a conspiracy of even 3 or 4 people, somebody talks when they get in trouble, so they can, get money or blackmail or get a reduced sentence or whatever, or get infamy and fame. So it's not possible that many thousands of people, but in some of the evidence they use, like, look at this photo of the sky with Earth in the background, supposedly taken from the moon. Where's all the stars, right? It's just black. Okay, those are the kind of silly and stupid things they use as evidence. Well, any of you can do a simple experiment. Go out at night on a starry, starry night, as Vincent van Gogh or Don McLean would say. Take a photo of the moon with the black background full of stars. Then look at your photo and see how many stars you can count in the photo, how many you can see. I can tell you the answer already: 0. But does that mean that your photo of the moon was faked? No. It has to do with simple photography concepts about exposure times and light. Anyway, Buzz Aldrin was the lunar module pilot. The commander was Neil Armstrong. He's the first one that set foot on the moon. There was controversy about it. Aldrin was upset and pissed off that he didn't get to be the first guy to set foot, because Armstrong wasn't really a professional pilot or military guy. He was a civilian. But anyway, after Armstrong stepped onto the moon, Aldrin got to do it about 19 minutes later. They were both there. And the Apollo 11 was launched on a big, giant Saturn V rocket from Kennedy Space Center in Florida on July, but it wasn't called that then, by the way. I don't believe. On July 16th. It was the 5th crewed mission of NASA's Apollo program. And it had a command module that had a cabin for 3 astronauts. Then there was a lunar service module and a lunar module that had a descent stage and then an ascent stage, an ascent back to the command module stage. It had to have one stage to go down to the surface of the moon and another one to go back up to the command module so they could come back home. I don't think they wanted to stay permanently. But anyway, they landed in the Sea of Tranquility. Doesn't that sound nice? The Sea of Tranquility. They had a hard time landing because the module was going too fast while it was orbiting the moon, and it was ahead of where it was supposed to be. I know I saw somewhere here the photos. I'm gonna find the moon photo of the map of the moon where they landed. Otherwise I won't be able to sleep tonight. Here we are. There's the moon, okay? And where they landed, let's see where it is. Luna 18. Why aren't they showing me? I have to find it. This is, by the way, the near side of the moon. This one. And there is no dark side of the moon. I'm sorry, Pink Floyd. There's only a far side of the moon. It's not always dark there. Here's a photo of it in bright sunlight. You see? The reason why it's not dark there all the time, it has the same phases as the near side of the moon. It's just that the moon is tidally locked, facing us all the time. So we never see the far side from Earth, so we get confused and think it's the dark side of the moon. But anyway, and if you're one of those crazy flat Earth freak believers, which I've made videos about, both satire and otherwise, they think the moon is very small and close to us, like I could reach out and touch it, if I was a little taller. It's just right up there in the sky, not very far, and it's actually just a big light bulb, right? With craters and stuff painted on the surface. You think I'm kidding, don't you? But those are the same people that say we never went to the moon. I can assure you we did. As one who spent his career in the rocket science business. But anyway, what else can we learn? Let's see if we can find interesting tidbits about the lunar mission that you might not know. Here's one interesting thing. For those who say, what good was spending that money on the space program? Well, for one thing, back then, 1972, most electronics was big, clunky, heavy stuff. And you couldn't send big, heavy stuff up in a little tiny command module or lunar module because of the weight requirements. Putting something into orbit takes a lot of rocket power and fuel, so they had to save weight. So technologies that were developed and required for Apollo were developed by Project Gemini. NASA adopted new advances and pushed forward these advances in Project Gemini. See if I can get my glasses straight so I can see you. One of the bad things about this cancer lymphoma is my left eye has degraded a great deal in vision. and I have to go, it has to do with the macula and some other things anyway. I have to go get an injection into my, I don't even want to think about it, left eye, and that may help fix it. But anyway, it's a complicated thing. I won't bore you with the details. It has to do with when the red blood counts in hemoglobin were very, very small, the eye was trying to compensate by growing little capillaries that don't belong. Now we have to get rid of them. That's an aside you don't want to know about. Anyway, what happened was, for the Apollo program, they had to advance new technologies, and so they figured out how to make semiconductor MOSFETs, metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors, as well as silicon integrated circuits, ICs. That was the forerunner to creating the computers and internet, which we all now use and enjoy. Would not have come about as expeditiously without the space program pushing forward miniaturization. So be thankful, because it might have taken a few more decades otherwise, and you might still be using an old dial telephone instead of the, little iPhone that you have that does everything. And everything it does is far more than what you could do with a giant warehouse full of computers back in 1970 or so. Anyway, the Apollo program had been halted after a fire on Apollo 1, which killed the 3 astronauts, sadly for them. But it got restarted after they did additional tests a few years later, until they perfected the lunar and command modules. The Apollo 11 insignia looked like this. That also showed up on the back of the Eisenhower dollar, a big round silver dollar that was not precious metal, by the way. It might have been 40% silver. I'll have to go back and, no, it was not precious metal. But anyway, the original insignia was considered too aggressive because the eagle had its talons out like this, like it's gonna grab, and fight. And so they said, oh, we don't want the dwellers on the moon to think of us as too aggressive. So let's close the talons around an olive branch of peace. So that's why you see the closed talons around the olive branch. And anyway, that was the patch for the insignia, the mission emblem. Let's see. The shadow, what does it say here? Collins added a lunar background with the Earth in the distance. So originally it didn't have that. Armstrong and Collins decided that eagle and the moon should be their natural colors, and decided on a blue and gold border. Armstrong was concerned that 11 would not be understood by non-English speakers, so they went with Apollo 11 instead of spelling out 11 right here. They went with the 11, make it numeric, numeral thing. Let's see, site selection. Areas that appeared promising on photographs taken from Earth were found to be totally unacceptable. I won't go on with all this stuff that they tried to figure out, but the targeted site for landing had to be smooth with relatively few craters. It had to have an approach path free of large hills, tall cliffs, or deep craters that might confuse the landing radar and cause bad readings. They had to reach it with a minimum of propellant on the stage for descent and a whole bunch of other things. Visibility, the sun, time of day, general slope. You know, there's a lot of features on the moon that are not worn down by rain or wind. Big impact craters just stay that way for thousands and tens of thousands of years. There's nothing to erode them. Sometime we'll do something about Mars, because it has a giant... Mars is only half the size, roughly, of Earth, yet it has a volcanic mountain that's about 4 times as high as Mount Everest. It's huge, gargantuan. Anyway, talk about that in some other video. The first question they asked at the press conference, I already told you. Aldrin, can you hear the rain in the background? It's raining hard outside. We had no fall. We went straight from a long, cool winter into, summer, cool summer, like one hot day, to fall, right to winter. But anyway, Aldrin wanted to be the first to step on the moon, but Armstrong was... I have another moon visitor I can see in my viewfinder right there. Right there. She made some yummy brownies today that are good. So I can't eat all those cookies, because then we would have to have also... Would you like one? Here, you guys. Can you guys help me eat these? Because I'm not supposed to eat all these brownies, but I'll try to make them last for, say, 1 month. Okay. One day. She doesn't believe me. Did you notice how dark she was compared to me? She has a nice tan. She calls me Whitey. But anyway, isn't it odd that white folks from North America want to be more dark, but the Filipinos want to be more light? I talked about it in another video. Anyway, here's the Saturn V taking off, the big launch vehicle that put them first into Earth orbit, and then on a later stage into, lunar orbit. The Apollo 11 entered Earth orbit at an altitude of 100 nautical miles, which would be 186 kilometers. About 12 minutes into its flight, moving pretty darn fast, right? Let's see what else. What interesting things can we talk about that you wouldn't know off the top of your head? At 12:52 Universal Time. What is Universal Time? Does anyone know? Okay. Aldrin and Armstrong entered the Eagle and began final preparations for lunar descent. All right, that's not interesting. They found themselves, as they were going down, descending to the moon, passing landmarks on the surface 2 or 3 seconds too soon. They were going too fast. They weren't going to make it to their landing spot where they wanted to be. They would overshoot, and their propellant supply was dwindling. It was getting more and more scary for them. Armstrong had to find a patch. He had several difficulties finding a good landing spot, but they finally did. Luckily for them. Otherwise, they'd still be on the moon today. If they hit something and rolled over, that would have been the end of that. All right. Turns out they thought they only had a few seconds of fuel left, but they really had about almost a minute of fuel by the time they touched down. They also didn't shut the engine down soon enough, and it could have caused a big problem, but it didn't, as it turned out. About 2.5 hours after they landed and did all their checks and things, they were ready to come out of the lunar module. But first, let's see, who did this? Was it Aldrin or Armstrong? Armstrong took communion privately. At this time, NASA was still fighting a lawsuit brought by atheist Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who had objected to the Apollo 8 crew reading from the book of Genesis, and she demanded the astronauts refrain from broadcasting any religious activity while in space. As such, Aldrin chose to refrain from directly mentioning taking communion on the moon. Who was administering the communion, I wonder? Anyway, never mind that. At this time, they had a 5-hour sleep period, or they were scheduled to have that, but they chose to begin preparations for their extravehicular activity early because they thought to themselves, we're not going to be able to just go to sleep. I don't think I would be able to sleep if I was the first person on the moon. Do you? You want to look out the windows and look for aliens and such, right? Here is a photograph of Neil Armstrong taken by Buzz Aldrin after they both got out. This, of course, is one of the photos that the moon landing was faked crowd conspiracy freaks use as their evidence. They say, oh, who was there to take this photo of Armstrong descending the ladder for the first time from the space vehicle? Huh? Okay. But of course, it was Aldrin who took the photo after both of them were out. This was not a photo of his first descent down the ladder, obviously. But anyway, those are the kind of silly evidence things they use, you know. Like I said before, you can find lots of websites that will debunk the conspiracy freaks with ruthless efficiency. But anyway, some of the highest heart rates recorded from Apollo astronauts occurred during their egress and ingress from the lunar module. It was very difficult, because it was so small, for them to get in and out of that thing, even though they had practiced many times at home. In fact, Aldrin damaged one of the circuit things when he got back in, you know, because he was having such a hard time moving around. Almost made it so they couldn't take off again, because it was a circuit for the engine to give them ascent back to the... Anyway, they described the surface dust as very fine-grained, but below that was the harder regolith, which is the moon dirt, but it's like spiky stuff that all fits together in a matrix and gives it a lot of ability to hold stuff. They had trouble planting the flag because after a couple of inches of fine moon dust, they were hitting that harder regolith stuff. Here they are planting the flag, or it's after the flag is planted there. And of course, once again, the space freaks, the conspiracy freaks say, oh, how are you going to have a flag waving in the breeze when there's no air there on the moon, right? You know, and of course, they had a flag that was pre-made to look like this, and it had a little rod sticking out of the top to hold it in place. So, you know, that was by design, of course, and it vibrated when they first set it up, but, you know, then it was just still. Let's see what else they say. The fine soil was quite slippery. Aldrin remarked that moving from sunlight into the eagle's shadow produced no temperature change inside the suit, but the helmet was warmer in sunlight, so he felt cooler in shadow. The mesa did not provide a stable work platform and was in shadow, slowing work somewhat part of the time. Anyway, they kicked up gray dust, which soiled the outer part of their spacesuits. That could have been a bit dangerous because it could get into the electronics of the module after they climb back in. By the way, they were allowed to take stuff with them in little personal packs, artifacts that they could come back with and say, this went to the moon and back, right? What would you take with you that would go to the moon and back? I think I would have taken some fairly solid objects that would tend to stay around. Maybe some commemorative coins and things like that, I don't know. Maybe take your wife's diamond ring and then give it back to her and say, this ring went to the moon and back, you know. So when you look up on a romantic evening at the full moon, you can know that your ring is the only one that's ever been there. You know, maybe something like that. But anyway, the lunar flag had to be put in clear view of the camera. Of all the jobs I had to do on the moon, the one I wanted to go smoothest was the flag raising, but the astronauts struggled with the telescoping rod. That was the rod that would hold the flag in place, you know, the Ripley thing, and could only jam the pole a couple inches into the lunar surface. They were afraid it would topple over in front of the TV camera, but it didn't. Lunar ascent. Well, they got some space rocks and everything from the moon. Almost 40, or more than about 42 pounds of space rock from the moon's surface they brought back. They had a seismic experiment package they left there, but it didn't work, unfortunately for them. When moving inside the cabin, Aldrin accidentally damaged the circuit breaker that would arm the main engine for liftoff from the moon. There was a concern this could prevent firing the engine, stranding them on the moon. That would be a big drag, wouldn't it? But they used a pen to activate the switch, and so it worked out okay. They ended up staying almost 24 hours on the lunar surface before they took off again. Let's see, they left behind an Apollo 1 mission patch to commemorate the memories of Roger Chaffee, Gus Grissom, and Ed White, who died when their command module caught fire during a test in January of 1967. And they even left 2 memorial medals of Soviet cosmonauts Vladimir Komarov and Yuri Gagarin, who died in 67 and 68, and they left a memorial bag containing a gold replica of an olive branch, as a traditional symbol of peace for the moon residents who might come around and look at the space debris left behind later and say, why are you Earthlings always trashing everything? Look at how much space junk they left behind. Aldrin added, this has been far more than 3 men on a mission to the moon. He goes on and gives a little speech. Anyway, the aircraft carrier USS Hornet was the one that came and picked them up after they got back to the command module and rocketed back to Earth and re-entry. In accordance with the extraterrestrial exposure law, you didn't know there was such a law, did you? A set of regulations promulgated by NASA in July 16th to codify its quarantine protocol. The astronauts had to be in quarantine for 3 weeks after they returned. They had to stay in a trailer on the Hornet, which was the aircraft carrier, and pick them up. And finally, the astronauts were given a clean bill of health, didn't have any scary moon viruses that could be detected. No aliens were growing inside them, ready to burst out of their chest and start munching everything in sight. So it was determined they could be out of their quarantine. And the moon rocks, let's see, the main repository for the Apollo moon rocks is at the Lunar Sample Laboratory Facility in Houston, Texas. And there's other collections in other places like White Sands in New Mexico. The 50th anniversary, which is now, this year, of the Apollo program, this Apollo 11 program, there were several things. They put a projection of the Saturn rocket, the Saturn V rocket, in the Washington Monument. And there's even a commemorative coin you can get from the U.S. Mint that shows the big boot print of Armstrong there in the coin. Not sure I would have chosen the footprint, but I guess it's the symbolism of the first step by man on another planetary body besides Earth that made that important. Maybe I'll buy this coin in the secondary market, because usually when you buy from the mint, you can get it online later for less money. It must be solid silver, I'm assuming. What do we have? Is there anything interesting in the National Geographic articles about this space travel that can add to what? After Apollo. This is interesting. It shows some of the things we want to do going forward. Other places we want to visit. You know, planets and asteroids, things like that. I was watching a special the other day on stuff that can come out of space and destroy the Earth. It was kind of scary in a way, but, like if we had a supernova in our galaxy close by close I mean quadrillions of miles away, say 100 light years, or say 1,000 light years even, that would be too close. It would wipe out life as we know it if we had one of those. Or a massive coronal ejection from the sun could be tough. Of course, a meteor strike or a comet strike. But one of the reasons that we have a solar system designed by God the way it is the Earth's pretty close to the sun, relatively speaking, 93 million miles, protects us. And then we have things like the magnetic poles, what that attract the cosmic radiation and the sun's solar radiation, so that it's not, the full force of that is not hitting us directly, right? That's what gives us the northern lights and things like that. But anyway, Jupiter is a giant solar system vacuum cleaner that sucks up meteors and comets because its gravitational force is so strong due to its huge mass. We can talk about that sometime. That's what protects Earth from strikes. Jupiter has sucked up thousands of those objects over the history of the solar system. We even got to see one in our lifetime, a comet that was pulled apart by Jupiter's gravity, and all the pieces impacted it and left these big black dark spots where they exploded. But anyway, let's see if there's anything else we can elaborate on. Before we close, you can see a whole thing in the National Geographic, the July edition, that would show you how their spacesuit worked and stuff when they were in space. They had to go through the hostile environment of the Van Allen radiation belts around the Earth, for example. And they were exposed to high levels of radiation, so things like that. Oh, look at this. A Soyuz, this is an article on space travel. It shows a train hauling a Soyuz spacecraft main stages there. It's kind of interesting. Soyuz being Russian. It shows various different launch vehicles, how they compare in size. When we reached the moon, it was a huge launch vehicle. Shows the various stages in there compared to others. There's the space shuttle on the right there. And then you look at the relative size of that thing, the modules on top there. So, quite impressive, isn't it? All right, so I think that will do it for today. I'll come back soon with, I think, a Pokemon video or something like that. I've had many requests. I can look at the cards. I won't bore you with doing it on the phone, because people don't really like to look at electronic displays when they're watching ASMR. So we won't do that. We'll I'll do something more tactile. Of course, I'll do the LP one, vinyl records, sometime over the next month or so, I think, as I was telling you about. I have to get them out of the storage in my garage. I don't know what container they're in. There's a lot of storage there, containers, because I have too much stuff. Anyway, that'll do it for today. I hope you were relaxed by this video. I was, because now I'm ready to sleep and take a nap because of the rain outside. So, until next time, oh, please give it a thumbs up, all right? Until next time, and subscribe, and click on the bell so you can be notified of new videos when I come out with one. Thank you for watching. Take care, everyone. Don't ASMR and drive. Bye-bye. That wasn't much of a wink, was it? That's better.